Welcome, healthy friends, to the Reality of Health podcast. Today we're talking about something super fun, PCR tests. I know, you're saying, I couldn't wait for this episode, Erik. That sounds like it's going to be so much fun. Well, can't say it's going to be fun, but I will tell you, it's important. Why? Because the entire world got shut down recently because of one of these. And it's possible it could happen here in the short-term future. They're talking about it, so let's get into it. Do you know how a PCR test is verified or even how it works? 99% of people, and I would say even more than that, don't know. They just trust the authorities, like your doctor or some other people you may have heard of. You may ask yourself, why are you doing an episode on PCR tests? Well, I'm glad you asked, because you're starting to hear a lot more about the next flu. It comes from one of those things you see flying around and chirping all the time and eating really gross food. Wink, wink. You know what I mean. If it goes away the last one, well, then you should know that these tests are not what you think they are. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, developed by a guy named Kary Mullis. Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, 1993. He said, the test doesn't prove anyone is sick. You can make it prove whatever you want it to by amplifying it. Don't worry, we'll get into it. And by the way, he still believes that viruses exist, which, as you know, I don't. And so many other people don't either. So basically, he would have been no help in stopping the powers that be from causing so much harm recently. He also credited the PCR test with the use of recreational drugs, especially LSD. Really? His patent was bought by Abbott Pharmaceuticals. So of course there is no conflict of interest here or anything. I would say they recently became even more profitable, if you know what I mean. So why do they use it? Well, this is important because it is the test they use to determine what you have. They shut down the whole entire world based on this test. Wouldn't you want to know what it is? They use it for DNA testing, for criminal situations, and also for checking your ancestry, which I'm going to show you is going to add doubt to your ancestry. Since they can't identify a virus, then how can you identify a genome? The genome is the blueprint for the pathogen virus. How can you find a piece of genetic material of a virus you have never isolated in order to make a PCR test to find the piece of genetic material to match it to in order to prove that this is the viral pathogen? Please let me illustrate this for you. If you have never seen a Ferrari, then how can you say you found a piece of a Ferrari if you've never seen a Ferrari? Think about that. This is why I did the Viruses Don't Exist episode. You're told you have something that nobody has ever seen. Then we want to inject you with a jab in order to stop said virus from hurting you. Where did they get the viral DNA from in order to make a jab when they have never found a virus? You have to find the Ferrari first in order to know what the parts are so you can identify them belonging to a Ferrari. Okay, so they've never found viruses really. They found debris from breakdown of tissue. Then they make up a test trying to find debris of said broke down tissues, claiming they finally found this virus. This should be the end of all virology. Mike Stone calls it virology. It's a pseudoscience. It's anti-scientific, and it's created nothing but fear and detriment to everyone's lives for the last 80 years. And because it's pushed down your throat so much, you have a tendency to believe it. Well, it's time to turn the tables. Tell the people who tell you you need to test, no, I don't. I know if I don't feel well, and I know what to do when I don't feel well. Leave me alone. There are no viral tests to prove you have any virus at all whatsoever. It's a lie. It's a fear tactic. Yeah, you can tell I'm getting heated. Well, that's because when you're lied to, somebody has to stand up and tell you you were probably right when you were wondering whether you should take a vaccine or how do you even know this thing is real. All of this is such a hindrance to common sense and logic. Prominent virus researchers and doctors and scientists have admitted that they've never isolated a virus. So how do you test for something that you've never isolated? Okay, all right, I'll calm down. All right, I'll calm down. So what is the test? Well, this test has created all kinds of research and diagnoses. It's the basis for genetic research and medical research and criminal investigations, and it's said to be the defining test that proves you have such and such disease or pathogen or virus or genetic abnormality, or we found your DNA at the scene of a crime. You're guilty. I know this might be hard to follow, but you have to hear this. This is what they base everything you have been told to believe on. This is how they conduct the test in order to prove that you have a virus. I'm going to step out on a limb and say 99% or more of people don't know how they conduct any test to determine something exists that is out to kill you. So how's this done? How does it find what they want to find? Well, I'm going to say strap in because this is going to get intense, a little bit technical. Bear with me. Hope you make it through it. They take pieces of genetic material. Then they use a primer, which attaches to the genetic material. Then they add enzymes called polymerases, which they use like E. coli. By the way, I thought that was a bacterial, not an enzyme. This splits the DNA from a double to a single strand. Now, mind you, all the chemicals they use don't matter, and they apparently don't have any effect, like they disappeared somehow, and the only thing they find is a single strand of DNA. What? How? Kind of like a zipper. Somehow they separated the zipper without any verification, like a control to prove that that actually happened, and then they use acid and alkaline chemicals. Then they vortex it. Then they incubate it. At a high temperature, I might add, almost boiling. Then they spin it to separate the stuff, and then they may do this several times. They use this method to, quote, find, unquote, the genetic material that they say they can't ordinarily find. They had to amplify this whole thing. They had to multiply it so that they can identify whatever this virus they want to find, or DNA. Then they add synthetic alcohol and incubate it again, then spin it again to separate once more. Then they air dry it. Then they wash it again with alcohol and spin it again. And then they claim this is the isolated DNA of the virus. Do you think for 1 minute that after all of that, you have not contaminated or destroyed whatever you were trying to find in the first place? But Erik, it is highly technical and a precise procedure, and it must work, otherwise they wouldn't do it. Well, they have to go through all those steps to prove it to you because they say there isn't enough DNA or viruses in your snot to find the DNA or the viruses. But they say you are teeming with DNA and viruses so much that you will infect everyone you come in contact with. Well, if that's the case, then you would be able to see it in a normal sample. Well, they say there are trillions of these particles in even a small amount of snot. Wait, what? That would be like panning for gold in the ocean. You finally find gold the size of a grain of sand, and then you say, see, the oceans are full of gold. But in order to find that gold, you had to go through multiple steps in order to see that grain of gold in the entire ocean. But of course, they say there are trillions and trillions of these pieces of gold in just a cup of sand from the ocean. It's just ridiculous. There is no test, there is no DNA, and there is no virus, just like there's no gold. Okay, I know that was boring, but if you're still listening, does that sound to you like a trustworthy test? They can do that amplification as many times as they want to then declare, see, we found it. You found what? You had a piece, then destroyed it, then washed it, then said, here it is. This is the particle in your body. So you took my Ferrari, crushed it, then you burned it, and you ground it up into tiny pieces, then you put it in a bath of toxic chemicals. Yes, they use toxic chemicals to find this, which dissolved the pieces. Then you added more chemicals. Then you spun it in a centrifuge, then repeated the washing process several more times with more chemicals, and then told me that you found a particle from a Ferrari. Is that what you're telling me? My question is, how do you know it was from a Ferrari and not a Mustang or a bicycle or a skateboard or even a shoe? You see, the more technical they make something, the more people believe it. Because you can't just do the test yourself. You have to believe them. After all, they wear the white coats and they use high-tech equipment. They can find whatever they want and tell you things like what we found, and you will never be able to say, prove to me how you found that. There is so much more to this that I won't even go into because it's either more nonsense or just frankly totally boring, and also is very hard to believe. Don't get caught up in the PCR test. It's fake to prove a fake virus, to prove a fake DNA of that virus. You are not sick with a virus that they cannot prove. And if they say you have this virus, then say, prove it to me. They're going to say, we did the PCR test. That's called circular reasoning. Well, I got that off my chest, that's for sure. Does that make you feel better to know that they cannot test for something that doesn't exist? Don't believe everything you're told or sold. Thank you for listening. As usual, if you need any consult, let me know. Otherwise, take care of yourselves. I really do appreciate all of you. I'm out.